George Washington. General, founding father, first president, father of our country. All of these titles were earned by a great man named George Washington. He grew up in colonial Virginia. His father died when he was 11, so his brother, Lawrence, made sure George knew how to be a gentleman, as well as how to read and do basic math. When George Washington was a teenager, he joined the Virginia militia in the French and Indian War. This war was fought between the British and the French over land in North America. The Native Americans joined the French in the fight because they were afraid that the British would take over their land. George Washington was fighting on the side of the British. This was before the colonists needed freedom from Great Britain. It wasn't until after the British won the French and Indian War that George King III began to treat the colonists unfairly. He began imposing taxes and laws that the Americans found to be unjust. George Washington, along with the delegates from the other colonies, met as the Continental Congress and decided to fight the British together. In May of 1775, Congress chose Washington to be the first general of the Continental Army. He had a tough job, as most of the soldiers had no experience in the army. They were just farmers, going up against the world's greatest military. There were times when many of the American soldiers wanted to give up, but Washington encouraged them and remained by their side through the losing battles and the bad conditions they sometimes faced. He proved to the soldiers that he was trustworthy and they knew that they could count on him. He led them to victory over the British. Washington served 2 terms as the President of the United States. He only made executive decisions that would unite the country, like constructing roads between states and building post offices. He stepped down after serving 8 years because he didn't want to rule too long, like a king. New nation. Everyone knows that George Washington was America's first president, but did you know that he didn't want to be? He only accepted the title because he wanted to help make the nation stronger after the Revolutionary War, which ended the rule of King George III over the United States. King George had been what the Americans considered a tyrant. He unfairly imposed taxes and laws on the people without giving them a say in the matter. Washington didn't want to be the second King George. After the Revolutionary War, the United States government was limited by the Articles of Confederation. The delegates of the Constitutional Convention did not want the government to have too much power, as the British government did. There was not a president or a national court. The government was very weak, and the delegates were divided on how to make it stronger. One of the biggest conflicts was between the large and small states. Everyone could agree that people should have a say in the government, but no one could agree on how to count the votes. The larger states wanted the number of representatives to be based on population. The smaller states wanted all the states to have an equal number of representatives. Finally, after much debate, the delegates decided on a 2-house Congress with a Senate and a House of Representatives. It was called the Great Compromise. These lawmaking groups would make up the legislative branch of the government. The delegates also decided that there should be one head of the government, the president. The Congress, as well as the judicial branch, or national court, would help keep the president from having too much power. So he wouldn't be another dictator like King George III. Since many people were still very anxious about a government leader, the delegates knew they had to elect someone that the people already trusted. George Washington was the first and only president unanimously elected as President of the United States.